Millions of years ago, long before Antarctica was covered in ice, it was a land of forests and rivers. The air was cool, but not frozen, and strange creatures ruled its valleys. Among them walked one of the most surprising predators ever found in the far south, Cryolophosaurus. He was unlike any other carnivore. Long and sleek, with a crest that curved across his head like a frozen wave, he looked almost royal, a king of cold lands. His name would later mean the frozen crested lizard, but in his time, he was simply the hunter of the south. Cryolophosaurus wasn't the largest predator of his age, but he was fast, clever, and built for the chill. He hunted in twilight, where snow began to form on the mountaintops, and the low sun barely touched the horizon. His eyesight was sharp, his legs strong. He could chase smaller dinosaurs through icy forests, his breath steaming in the cold air. Every step left deep marks in the frost-covered ground, prints that would remain hidden beneath layers of ice for millions of years. The cold didn't bother him much. His body was likely covered with thin, insulating feathers, keeping him warm as temperatures dropped. His crest, bright, maybe red or orange, wasn't for fighting. It was for showing off. In a world of snow and shadow, it was a signal, a warning, or perhaps even a display to attract a mate. He was both a killer and a showman, a creature made for survival and spectacle. Cryolophosaurus hunted mostly alone. He preferred stealth and surprise over brute force. His prey was smaller, early herbivores like Glacialosaurus, and sometimes he even scavenged, feeding on whatever the cold claimed first. In the silence of the Antarctic dusk, the only sound was the crunch of his steps and the soft call he used to warn others. This was his territory. But what made Cryolophosaurus truly special wasn't just where he lived. It was how he lived. To survive in a land where days could last for months and then vanish into endless night, he had to adapt. When food became scarce, he slowed down. When the sun disappeared, he hunted by moonlight or memory, following the trails of creatures buried beneath snow. He was an artist of survival, moving between hunger and patience, between life and the freeze. There were no real rivals here, not like the T-Rex or Allosaurus had. In these frozen lands, Cryolophosaurus was both the predator and the ruler. He knew every ridge, every frozen river, every hidden cave where warmth still lived. And even though the cold grew stronger with each passing age, he stayed. When other species moved north to find warmth, Cryolophosaurus remained, a shadow among glaciers, a memory waiting to be found. Millions of years later, when the world changed and ice buried the ancient forests, his bones lay hidden deep under the frost. Then one day, human hands dug through the ice and stone and found the crest. Still curved, still proud, still beautiful. The scientists were stunned. How could a dinosaur, a warm-blooded predator, live so far south? The answer was simple. Because Cryolophosaurus wasn't just a hunter. He was the proof that life could thrive even at the edge of the world. Even now, as his fossils rest in Antarctic rock, his story continues to inspire. Cryolophosaurus reminds us that strength isn't just power. It's adaptation, patience, and the will to survive against the cold. He was the frozen hunter, and his legend will never melt away. As the seasons turned and the cold deepened, Cryolophosaurus learned to adapt like no other predator. When the winds blew from the south, carrying snow and silence, most creatures hid, but not him. He moved slowly through the frozen forest, conserving energy, following the faint trails of life that still pulsed under the snow. He could smell what others couldn't, a faint trace of warmth, a breath of movement, even the smallest heartbeat under the ice. Cryolophosaurus felt it all. Food was rare. Glacialosaurus and other plant-eaters had migrated, seeking valleys with sunlight and moss. But Cryolophosaurus had patience. He waited for days, hidden behind fallen trees, watching the edges of frozen rivers where prey would come to drink. His camouflage, feathers dusted with snow and ash, made him vanish into the white. Then when the moment came, he exploded into motion. A blur of claws, teeth, and cold fury. He wasn't fighting for territory anymore. He was fighting for survival. Even when he failed to catch his prey, Cryolophosaurus learned. He studied the wind, the snow, the way his targets moved. He became a master of the ice, not just a hunter, but a strategist. Every movement, every sound mattered. He could walk over frozen lakes without breaking the surface, balance on ridges, and leap through the mist like a ghost. No other predator of his world could match his skill. As weeks passed, the cold grew stronger. Night lasted longer, and the sun became a pale memory. Still, he kept moving. Sometimes he fed on the frozen remains of creatures that didn't survive the winter. But that, too, was survival. He had no pride, only instinct. And that instinct kept him alive where others would fall. When the great storms came, even the strongest creatures hid. But Cryolophosaurus faced them. He found shelter inside caves carved by ancient rivers, their walls covered with frost and silence. Inside, he rested, his breath fogging the air, his eyes half closed. Outside, the storm screamed for days. Yet when it passed, he was still there. The ice couldn't take him. One day, as the first rays of sunlight returned after months of darkness, Cryolophosaurus stepped out again. The landscape was different now. Frozen trees, broken rivers, mountains of white. But his territory was still his. He raised his head and let out a low, deep call that echoed through the valleys. Part warning, part triumph. It was his way of saying, "I'm still here." He was more than a dinosaur now. He was a survivor of the Ice Age, a creature that refused to vanish. Even as his world changed, even as new species evolved, the spirit of Cryolophosaurus remained in the ice, a silent promise that nature always finds a way. The Ice Age had no mercy, and neither did the land. The forests of Antarctica were dying, turning from green to gray, but through that frozen silence one figure still walked. The last of his kind, Cryolophosaurus. Once there were others like him. Now he was alone. His world had changed, and every breath came with effort. Still, he moved forward, the crest on his head catching what little light the sun still gave. He followed the rivers that once brought life to his hunting grounds. Now they were lines of ice, stretching into the distance like silver scars. Each step echoed across the frozen land, the sound swallowed by the wind. But he wasn't just wandering, he was searching. For food, for warmth, for any sign that life still remained. Days passed, the air grew sharper. His claws cracked the surface of frozen snow. Sometimes he caught the scent of something living, a distant shape, a flicker of movement, and chased it through blinding snow, only to find nothing but shadow. Yet he didn't stop. He couldn't. To stop moving meant to die. So he kept going, the lone king of a land that no longer had a throne. Cryolophosaurus wasn't only fighting the cold, he was fighting time. His kind was fading, their bones already being buried by the frost that would one day preserve them. But for him, extinction wasn't just a word, it was a challenge. He refused to fall quietly. Even as hunger burned through him, even as the storms tore the world apart, he pressed on. The last echo of an age ending in ice. One evening, the sky turned red. It wasn't fire. It was the light of a dying sun reflecting off the ice. Cryolophosaurus stood at the edge of a frozen cliff, looking down at the valley below. The same valley where he had hunted, fought, and lived. Now it was still and white, silent as a grave. He lowered his head. Maybe he remembered the sound of other footsteps beside him, the calls of rivals or the rustle of prey in the trees. Now there was only wind, yet in that silence there was peace. He had ruled longer than any other predator of his frozen world, and even though his time was ending, he remained proud. He turned slowly and walked back into the snowstorm. The wind covered his tracks almost immediately, erasing his path, but not his story. Because some creatures are remembered not for how long they lived, but for how fiercely they refused to give up. Millions of years later, when scientists found his bones beneath the Antarctic ice, they realized what he had done. He wasn't just another dinosaur. He was proof that even in the coldest, harshest corners of Earth, life finds a way to rise and to endure. The storm passed. For days, snow fell without end, covering everything. The trees, the rivers, even the old hunting grounds where Cryolophosaurus once ruled. When the wind finally stopped, there was silence. No movement, no sound, no sign of life. The world had gone still. But deep beneath the surface, something remained. Buried under layers of ice and time, his bones lay preserved, frozen in perfect stillness. The crest that had once caught the light now rested under the frost, waiting. Each flake of snow that fell above him became another page in Earth's story, another reminder that even the strongest creatures can vanish. But their legacy never truly dies. Millions of years passed. Continents drifted, oceans shifted, and ice swallowed the land. The forests turned to glaciers, and mountains rose above the frozen sea. But still deep below, Cryolophosaurus waited, not alive but not forgotten. Then one day, in a world filled with new species, a group of humans arrived. They came not as predators but as seekers. Scientists wrapped in heavy coats, their breath forming clouds just like his once did. They dug through the frozen layers, breaking through the silence of ages. And then the moment came. The sharp edge of a tool struck something solid. Bone. The team carefully brushed away the ice and stone, revealing the shape beneath. First, part of the jaw, then the teeth, and finally, the crest. It was exactly as it had been millions of years before, curved and elegant, like a crown of frozen fire. The scientists stared in awe. They knew instantly what they had found. They lifted each bone gently, taking notes, measuring angles, documenting every detail. The frozen hunter had returned, not to walk the earth again, but to tell his story. Piece by piece, they rebuilt his skeleton in a glass-walled museum, surrounded by lights that shimmered like the Antarctic sun. And when visitors looked up at him, towering and proud, they didn't just see bones. They saw courage. Cryolophosaurus had survived in his own way, not by escaping extinction, but by leaving behind proof that life can adapt, endure, and surprise us all. His fossils became a bridge between worlds, the frozen past and the living present. Children pointed at his crest, amazed at the idea that such a creature once walked the earth. Scientists continued to study him, unlocking clues about ancient climates, biology, and evolution. And in that way, Cryolophosaurus still lived. Not in flesh and blood, but in memory and wonder. Every time a child looked at his skeleton and asked, what was he like? His story began again. The echo beneath the ice still spoke, not in roars, but in inspiration. Because legends never die. They just sleep, waiting for someone to find them. In the frozen south, a hunter once ruled the land of snow and silence. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the fastest. But he was built for survival. The Cryolophosaurus, a predator born of ice and storm. When others fell to the cold, he learned to move with it, to breathe with it, to become it. For millions of years, his roar was lost beneath the ice. But now, his story returns, from the depths of Antarctica to the hands of those who uncovered his legacy. The Ice King rises again, not as a monster, but as a legend. Cryolophosaurus, the survivor, the hunter, the echo beneath the ice.